Top of your order of worship this morning are these words, anonymously from someone in Livonia, Michigan. Now is the time to come together, the whole world, to piece together this broken heart we all own. It is in that spirit that we have gathered once again in and from this house made sacred by the love of generations, in and from this place of peace. We have gathered for comfort and for inspiration, gathered to remind ourselves that we are not alone, to remember that we have each other, to remember that we are and always have been and always will be at one with all the family, the human family, and all the family of life. We have once again gathered in and from this ancient house on this ancestral land of the Massachusetts, the Wampanoag, and other First Nations peoples, and it is good so to have gathered. Chalice lighter this morning is Eric Cornetta. Eric. Speak from here and then come on over.
I light the chalice this morning. I think it's our 7th principle about respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. And from an article written by the daughter of Wendell Berry's, an editor of Wendell Berry's that he liked. Dorothy says, "My father, responding to an essay about war and ecological degradation, asked, hasn't, quote, civilized, end quote, man almost always been out of touch with the natural world, a parasite, a destroyer of his planet?" Berry replied, "Thomas Merton says man went wrong when he left the Stone Age. We have made piles of money a person, corporations, and so here's to respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part."
Thank you, Eric. And together we are invited to sing hymn in that same spirit, hymn number 163, "For the Earth Forever Turning," number 163.
Yeah.
Good morning. And a warm welcome to worship at and from our Old Ship Meeting House. I'm Reverend Ken Reed Brown, with pronouns he, him, and his. If you are new, we look forward to getting to know you, whether you're on Zoom or here in the Meeting House. If there is anyone new here, I'm not sure, please feel free to stand right now and tell us who you are so that we can offer a warmer welcome to you. And if there's anyone new on Zoom, be in touch, please. We look forward to getting to know everybody and welcoming everybody warmly. After the service this morning, everyone here in the Meeting House is invited to gather in the warmth of our fellowship hall across the street in our parish house and to share conversation. Not refreshments yet, but we're looking in that direction as things improve. And for Zoomers, the link will remain on for conversation there. 2 announcements, upcoming events. This afternoon, the Interfaith Seder will be held from Congregation Sha'arei Shalom. It's on Zoom. We've sent the link out. It was in the Sunday reminders that we sent out, I believe, on Friday evening. Information is there and as well in our earlier newsletter. So please join us at 3 o'clock for the Interfaith Seder. And then this Saturday evening, our Elizabeth Torrey hosting once again our Equinox Poetry Circle. That will be on Zoom only, and the Zoom link will be in our weekly update this Saturday evening to celebrate the beginning of spring. A story for all ages. In the 1970s, Pete Seeger, you've heard of him, was invited to sing in Barcelona, Spain. Now, Franco was still in power, the remnants of fascism, the last government in Europe still nominally fascist. But it was declining, and a pro-democracy movement was rising. And some of the people involved in the pro-democracy movement were staging a concert to which they had invited a number of groups, including Pete Seeger, the famous freedom singer from this country, of course. 100,000 people were gathered in the stadium. They listened to the rock groups, but they were waiting for Pete. Well, just before Pete went on, a government official came up to him. Now, I don't know how much of this story is true factually. It might have been embellished, but I think there's got to be truth in it. I think I heard online at some point Pete actually tell it in some form. In any case, just before Pete came on, government official came up to him and he had a piece of paper and on it was a list of songs. He said, "These are songs, Mr. Seeger, that you may not sing here." And Pete was kind of saddened by this. He looked at it and he said, "Well, this looks a lot like my set list." But they insisted he was not to sing any of these songs. Well, Pete took the government's list of banned songs and he went on to stage. He held up the paper and he told the crowd, "I'm told I'm not allowed to sing any of these songs." Nobody said you were not allowed to sing these songs. I will strum the chords, and if you like, you can sing along. And so the story goes, that's exactly what happened. He started strumming the chords to songs that were familiar to people in Spain, even the pro-democracy movement, and they started singing. He strummed one after another on the banjo, and they all sang. They all sang. 100,000 freedom singers breaking the law with Pete Seeger. What were they going to do? Arrest 100,000 people? No. We know Franco didn't last much longer. Maybe that had a little to do with it. The government had been beaten, as one telling of the story has it, by a few banjo chords and the fame of a man whose songs, as this teller puts it, were on the lips of the whole world. Eric, you know which one I'm playing. If I had a out of love. I had a bell, I had a bell. Danger, warning, love. Oh, if I had a song, warning, danger, warning, sing out of love. Now I've got and I've got a bell, and I've got all over this land. It's the hammer of justice, it's the bell of freedom, it's a song about a love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. See, nobody told me I couldn't sing it, but really wanted to hear you sing it, and we did. Yeah, what a story! True then, in whatever precise fashion, and important now when justice and freedom is threatened once again. We know where. Time for candles of joy, sorrow, and concern. If you're on Zoom, you may type your joy or sorrow or concern into chat, and in a few moments, Daveline will share them with the group. I will light the first candle as we've been doing and will continue to do for the people of Ukraine. I invite additional joys, sorrows, or concerns from anyone here in the meeting house. Yes, Deb.
So last week during the conversation, I implied that older Americans are less likely to learn about change. That's not true, particularly here, where all of our older Americans are lifelong learners. And it was also hurtful, and I am sorry. So the candle is for lifelong learning.
Thank you, Deb. A candle for lifelong learning, and especially for those older among us. I include myself these days, of course, in that. Thank you, Deb, and for your warm apology for your words last week. Yes, Jennifer? For your neighbor, Peter, is that right? Who a couple of weeks ago you told us he had received a new heart, and the heart is pumping, and he's at Spalding Rehab, and we send our good wishes, healing wishes to him and to his wife and all their family. Thank you, Jennifer. Yes, Corey.
A couple of weeks ago, Ruben asked for some prayers for his sister who was struggling. He just wanted to thank everybody, so this is a candle of gratitude because things have worked
Thank you, Corey. This, again, in relation to a candle from a few weeks ago from Reuben and the struggles his sister was going through, and thanks for the prayers and thoughts. His sister is doing better. May that continue. Yes, Elizabeth.
Candle of joy, appreciation, and gratitude, I guess, for music and singing particularly. I've been so moved watching seeing the choirs of the Ukrainians singing, which is to help so much in carrying the grief that they're all bearing. And it helps us to, when we sing, to help them carry it.
Thank you, Elizabeth. A candle for music, and especially the power of music now in Ukraine, the choirs singing and others, and how it all helps us to carry the grief and sadness and hope. Evelyn, is there anyone on chat?
Yes, Ken, I have two candles, a candle of joy from Maura for this beautiful community that has nurtured and welcomed her. And a candle from Nina Welford, a candle of remembrance for her former husband and wonderful friend John, whose 63rd birthday would be March 15th. Nina also notes his family is celebrating a memorial service in Texas this week, and her heart goes out to all of them.
Thank you, Daveline. We light candles for both of those joys and concerns and continued sorrow for John's family. These candles burn as well for any joys, sorrows, or concerns unspoken among us, even though they're no doubt deeply felt in our hearts. We sing, I don't think we have a lot of youth here, but there's Sierra, there's Deb to accompany, we'll sing them out. Go now in peace. Go now in peace.
Hearts open, minds awake, change
gather for meditation and prayer, I'd actually like to add a candle. You may have seen that the flowers this morning are given by our 3 children, Sandra, Adam, and Eliza. And the candle burns with their shared gratitude for all that the congregation has given to them over all these years, and a candle of gratitude for our wonderful 3 children and their families. May we share a time of meditation, prayer, and silence. May we settle mind, body, spirit, breathe into these moments of quiet. Breathe into and from the yearnings of our hearts. As we hold in our hearts the joys, the sorrows, the concerns we've heard this morning, as we hold in our hearts one another. And breathe deeply into those yearnings that become prayers urgently for the people of Ukraine, for their safety and well-being. Prayers that the people of Russia be safe from their own government's oppressions. Prayers urgently for peace, with justice, with freedom. Prayers for wisdom enough in the world's leaders to seek and find peace without escalating war. Even as we also pray, as we always do, for homes for the homeless, food for the hungry, safety for the refugee, justice for the oppressed. And always and again for true peace. May the prayers of our hearts become the work of our hands. May we now continue our meditations and prayers in contemplative, may it be renewing, silence. 2 readings this morning. The first will be shared by Paul Kelly, and then following that, second by Diane Jordan. Paul, thank you so much.
Our first reading this morning is from chapter 54 of the Tao Te Ching. What is firmly established cannot be uprooted. What is firmly grasped cannot slip away. It will be honored from generation to generation. Cultivate virtue in yourself, and virtue will be real. Cultivate it in the family, and virtue will abound. Cultivate it in the village, and virtue will grow. Cultivate it in the nation, and virtue will be abundant. Cultivate it in the universe, and virtue will be everywhere. Here ends the reading.
Our second reading is Let Them Not Say from Ledger by Jane Hirschfeld. Let them not say, we did not see it. We saw. Let them not say, we did not hear it. We heard. Let them not say, they did not taste it. We ate. We trembled. Let them not say, it was not spoken, not written. We spoke. We witnessed with voices and hands. Let them not say, they did nothing. We did not enough. Let them say, as they must say something, a kerosene beauty, it burned. Let them say we warmed ourselves by it, read by its light, praised, and it burned. Here ends the reading.
Thank you both, Paul and Diane. Our morning offering will be given and received. As you know, there are many ways to give. If you're here in the meeting house, there are baskets at the exits for your offerings, cash or check. Don't leave your credit card, though. That wouldn't be good. To give in that manner, you go to the donate link on our Old Ship Church homepage. And there in the drop-down menu, you can give to our ongoing ministries through the Sunday Plate offering, and or you can give to our monthly outreach offering, which this month will support our youth group's service trip into Boston and Common Cathedral. In both these ways, we together gather our resources to support all of our ministries as we try indeed to make the prayers of our hearts become the work of our hands. With thanks in advance for your generosity. A morning offering offertory come Sunday to Gellington and Heather and Christopher.
God Almighty, God of love.
sermon title, as you've no doubt seen, is What? What, after all, is normal? Talk about getting back to normal. So to begin with this morning, I'm going to share some words pieced together from a few of the sermons I preached 2 years ago in the spring following the lockdown, as we were thrown out of what we considered to be normal. One of my sermons included this passage. Wendell Berry once wrote that, quote, "When we no longer know what to do, we have come to our real work. And when we no longer know which way to go, we have begun our real journey." So I went on to ask in that sermon, what is our real journey now in this trackless wilderness that we've been thrown into? Our journey when the sidewalk ends. My hope, I said, not returning to our culture, striving for ever more consumption or more exotic experiences or always needing to be the best and so on. Rather, a journey towards more equality, more kindness, more love, toward really understanding that we're all in this together. Further, many have noted that the lockdowns necessitated by coronavirus, though a real hardship to millions, we knew and know, have at the same time brought a healing moment for Earth, as our use of fossil fuels declined precipitously, cars and industrial plants, and so on. Those clear skies, do we remember those clear skies? We, of course, I continued, must bring back the livelihoods of the millions out of work around the planet. But the challenge is to do so in ways that don't just replicate business as usual that has, as we know, been overheating the planet now for decades. Great peril to our own human lives and to all life. And this means that the challenge will be, I said 2 years ago, will be to create a new improved normal as coronavirus recedes, greening our way of life on our home planet, living more gently on the earth, using less energy with all of our, including with all of our frenetic moving around, maybe moving around less. We've learned we can do this. Parenthetically, I remember going out for runs on mornings during those early days. It was a ghost town. Nobody was out, no cars, no people, and the skies were so clear. But we need to do that all as at the same time we reduce, I said, the social inequities that have become laid bare by the pandemic. All as we rise to the task a German astronaut once named humankind's most urgent task, which is to cherish and preserve the earth for future generations. Well, then I asked in another sermon, I think it was, does all this seem unlikely? Maybe, but who knows? Who really knows? So back to Wendell Berry, who continued in that same passage, the mind that is not baffled is not employed. And the impeded stream, he said, the impeded stream is the one that sings. How about that phrase? The impeded stream is the one that strings. Our stream of business as usual is 2 years ago, certainly impeded now, on the whole planet impeded. Yet there is singing, lots of actual singing to help and heal and enjoy, to be inspired, lifted. And there is the singing. Remember this 2 years ago? There is the singing, too, of innumerable numbers of people helping one another, reaching out to one another, and simply helping through the challenging act of staying home to slow the spread of the virus, to save lives. Do we know where or how this journey will end, I asked, where life is taking all of us? Of course not. But the question we can answer, I said in 2020, is in what spirit will we live these days and always? Millions upon millions of us around the planet are answering with kindness and love, guideposts for this mysterious journey we've always been on. Will life someday be just as it was before the pandemic? Actually, I concluded, I hope not. Rather, can we be patient enough, even as life resumes a vague semblance of normal activity, to be part of helping to make that better, more equitable and just and greener world than the one we've left behind? A world of too much rushing and too little savoring. A world of too much division and hate and not enough respect and understanding. and love. Thoughts from 2020. 2 years ago this week, right? Well, it may and understandably may seem that many, if not most, of the hopes that I and many others were articulating at the time, held in our hearts, have been dashed. It may, well, and understandably seem that the world as it is now is in many ways too much like it was in the before times, and in some ways perhaps worse, as the brutality and danger of Putin's criminal war against the people of Ukraine accelerates and replaces with fear, not just for the people of Ukraine, for all of us, many of the hopes we still harbored and still harbor for a better world post-pandemic. But truly, again, who knows? Who knows? You may recall the Chinese story, it's been shared here before, of the lost horse. On the northern frontier of China, a long time ago, lived a father and his son. And they had a beautiful horse. They had very little, but they had this beautiful horse. And one day the horse ran off to the nomads across the border. Neighbors came by and tried to console them. But the father said, what makes you think this isn't a blessing? Well, some months later, their own horse returned, and this time accompanied with a fine stallion. Beautiful horse. They now had 2 horses. The neighbors came to congratulate them, celebrate with them. After all, they had this beautiful new horse as well as their own horse back. And the father said, well, what makes you so sure this isn't a disaster? Well, the son loved riding that new stallion, a little bit of a wild horse, and one day fell off and broke his hip. You can tell the story, the next part of the story, as well as I. The neighbors came and consoled him. The father said, what makes you so sure this isn't a blessing? Well, about a year later, the nomads came in force across the border. Every able-bodied man was called to the battle. 9 out of 10 were lost. But the son, because of his serious injury, his broken hip, was unable to serve. And this enabled the father and son to continue caring for each other. One version of the story ends with this line, truly, blessing turns into disaster and disaster turns to blessing. The changes have no end, nor can the mystery be fathomed. Look, you and I know that life is ordinarily not nearly as simple as this story. We surely never wish for a disaster so that it might turn into a blessing or might proverbially be the blessing in disguise. But the story was created to make a point about change, right? And our sometimes faulty human judgments about how things are going and how they might go. What's a blessing? What's a disaster? It's a lesson for us today. It seems to me a simple lesson, but I think a critically important one, lest we become weighed down with our fears, even despair. Would we not do better to put aside such judgments? Yes, have our feelings, whatever they might be, but put aside the judgments and just do what we can in relation to whatever circumstance, personal or national or global, to do what we can today and tomorrow and the next day. Do what we can, as I often say, with who we are, what we have, where we are, what gifts and skills we can offer. However seemingly modest what we do may seem to be, it does add up. After all, nobody is more than one person, even though some seem to wield power beyond the one. As we heard in Jane Hirshfield's poem, Let Them Not Say, which was first written, by the way, in I think 2014 and became a rallying cry in 2016. You remember that winter and spring. Let them not say. It was her gentle, is still her gentle yet powerful call to action. We heard in that poem that we do, after all, know enough, we hear enough, we see enough to do what we can in regard, for example, to saving democracy, to helping people in the Ukraine, contributing to relief work, and much else. We do know enough, even though it's possible that everything we do will be not enough, as she writes. But maybe it will be enough. particularly if we continue to, as in that first reading, cultivate virtue in every circle of our lives, in our hearts, our families, and onward, outward, in the circles of life. And I would remind us, or tell you if you didn't know this, that the word translated virtue in this ancient Chinese text is de, as in Dao De Ching. And the word de, yes, it's often translated virtue. It's sometimes translated power. We could say it's the power of virtue when aligned with the Tao, with the universal way of life, what we might call, following Theodore Parker and Dr. King, the arc of the moral universe. If we can align with that, then virtue has power, right? In this, our own Unitarian Universalist principles with which Eric started us this morning, the seventh principle, we can find many worse guides to the way other than these principles which remind us to affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person, to support one another in our spiritual growth, to seek the truth as we also seek together justice and freedom and peace and world community in the midst of this interdependent web of life that we share. Well, all this said, here's one thing for sure. There's no going back to some past imagined normal. A normal, as we were saying even 2 years ago, and which we well know was not an entirely satisfying state of affairs in the world, even if our own lives, for many of us, of privilege seemed okay. We know it wasn't so, all too many. And neither is there going forward to some new settled normal when everything is okay. As traditions as diverse as ancient Greek philosophy and Buddhist teachings remind us, change is the constant. Nothing is settled for long. So yes, many of us are finding, even here, right, the ability now to return to some of our previous normal, so-called normal routines and activities. This is great. This is welcome and pleasant and more than okay, of course, grounds us. But we've also learned some new and different ways of living that will continue to serve us well. These new electronic ways of connecting, for example. We don't always have to hop on a plane or in a car to see someone. Welcome though that sometimes is, we can connect virtually, Zoom, FaceTime, and maintain those sustaining human connections. It's powerful for all of us wherever we are, and I expect powerful for the people of Ukraine right now, and maybe of Russia too, the people who are concerned about their own nation, staying connected. And further, perhaps collectively, as we move forward to the next stage of our lives, collectively more of us are, I expect, more awake in many ways to the threats to our democracy, to the realities of inequalities, the ongoing pandemic, we might say, of social inequality, and to the imminent and present danger of the climate crisis. And more awake to all this is itself a blessing that can lead us forward to further blessing, right? And it might even be further that even in regard to the tragic and heartbreaking, there's nothing good to say about it, realities of Putin's war in Ukraine can never be called a blessing in disguise, whatever happens next. But it might be that the unity of most of the world's nations and peoples in response to this criminal war could translate into a new era of unity and resolve when it comes to much else. Climate at the top of the list, surely, saving democracy and renewing democracy, which means eliminating social inequities at the same time, all this as well. And so, may we, each of us and all of us together, be awake and alert to the possibilities. It's not always easy to do this in the midst of fear or despair, but may we strive to be awake and help others to be awake and alert to the possibilities of each moment, each circumstance, never assuming we know how all things are going to turn out, for good or ill. Rather, living today, how many times have you heard me say this over the years? Living today in ways that are And it will make more likely the good of tomorrow, including all these things we've been talking about this morning: the rebirth of democracy, freedom, renewed flourishing of life, all life on our dear earth home, beloved community, in Dr. King's words, for all. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen. As I extinguish the flames of our 6 candles of joys and sorrows, we know that the joys and sorrows and concerns live in our hearts, and we know too that the love which sustains us in the midst of whatever our lives have brought, that continues as a flame in our hearts. And as I extinguish the flame of our chalice, the flaming chalice of our faith, may all that is represented by the principles of our faith continue in our lives, and may we share it with everyone on our life's journey. Humor is good too, the tricks the world plays on us. And singing is really good. Our closing hymn is in our teal soft-covered hymn book, a stirring hymn and anthem for this day and always. If every woman in the world, number 1026, every woman in the world in this month of women's history, 1026.
Dream of peace.
children, whatever gender, whatever color, whatever our form of life and of loving, may we be among those who reach out hands in love so that there is no more war among families, no more war and dispute among political parties, no more war among the nations. With this, may every step, every word be our prayer. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen.